How do I see what?
How do you see the people that are here?
So there's a chat screen. Oh, and hello everyone, we're live. But there's a chat screen on the left. Wait, yep, there we go. My right. Yeah, look on this. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Private chat. Yeah.
I had it on private chat instead of live comments. That's why I couldn't see it.
Oh yes, yeah, very good. Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Keystroke Medium, the show for readers, writers, and everyone in between. We are live today with Rick Partlow, and I just wanted to ask him some questions about his writing, what got him into writing, what his inspiration is, something that the readers who love Rick Partlow can get to know him and get him here on this video. So that's why we're here today. So hi Rick, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, yeah, just chilling. It's right before Christmas. So all of us, we've got our families, we're excited, but we also have some downtime. Perfect time to hop on the internet, hop on Facebook or YouTube and hear a little bit about you and your writing. So where are you right now?
I'm in Central Florida, where it's a nice 65 degrees or so.
Wow.
I'm sitting on the back porch in t-shirt and shorts. Hi, all you guys up north.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm in Delaware, so it's like 30-some degrees out there. And, we've got a friend in Alaska, Craig Martell, and it's like he posts numbers of negative degrees.
Well, he's in Fiji right now, though, so don't feel bad for him.
That's right. Good reminder that Craig's in Fiji.
But in Fiji with a hotel room with its own pool.
Yes. Amazing. So hello to everyone from wherever you are right now. We've got 3 people in the chat. We've got Scott saying hi. Dawn saying she can't see anything. Oh no, that's not good. And Jay, of course, is here. He says, looking forward to the interview with the lead-off batter for the anthology that is the space opera anthology Farthest Reach. And your short story is the lead-off batter. Yes, it is. I thought it was so much fun. It's really set in kind of a space western story.
Yeah, definitely. It's set in the universe of the Birthright books that I've written, and it's in like a kind of an outlaw world, or a whole bunch of outlaw worlds, and they were meant to be sort of old west, old west towns like in unincorporated territories and like South Dakota or something,
Yeah, you get a sense from what the characters say that there are all kinds of different planets in your universe with very different social structures. This one seems like kind of the Wild West, but you can tell that there's more sophisticated planets out there. And that makes for a pretty exciting world, just to think you can get on a spacecraft and go somewhere completely different. What was the inspiration for did you say Birthright series?
Yeah, it's a Birthright universe. The original series was 3 books, and then I wrote the prequel Glory Boy, and then there's the Recon series, the Tales of the Acheron series, the Psy War series, and now I'm writing the military science fiction series for Aethon. It takes place in the same universe, so it's all it's going to be like 15 books in the same universe.
Where did you come up with the original idea that it sounds like these other series kind of spawned off of wherever you started?
The original idea came to me when I was sitting in church in 1984. I was doodling because I was bored, and I just drew this picture of a futuristic commando, and I just started thinking of, what kind of technology is he using? What kind of society is he in? What do the worlds look like there? How does he get around? And it just started from there, and I started world building. And since I didn't really complete the first book in that series until about 1997 or so, I world built for a long time.
Yeah, like over 10 years, just keep on adding to it.
Yeah.
Now
I had a bad habit at the time of world building and writing little bits and never finishing anything.
I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
So did you keep collecting it in a notebook or something?
Multiple notebooks. I used to have this huge stack of spiral notebooks. I like the 5 subject college ruled spiral notebooks. And I would just take those and write, you know, story ideas, bits of stories, you know, technological backgrounds, governments, you know, all this other stuff. I had a huge collection of them. At some point, I ripped out the pages I wanted to save and put them all together in a notebook, and I still have some of those.
What was the first book you finished?
The first book, well, the first publishable book or the first book period? Because I finished, the first book I finished was when I was a junior in high school. I finished this really, really horrible men's adventure shoot 'em up style book that I wrote because I used to read the Mac Bolan, you know, anti-terrorist, anti-mafia, you know, lone gunman goes out and takes on a whole bunch of people. So I wrote that when I was in the junior in high school, and then I wrote another one that was kind of a action adventure style young adult type book. It was also really horrible. I don't have either one of those left. I threw them away a long time ago. But the first one I wrote that was suitable for publishing was Duty, Honor, Planet. I wrote Duty, Honor, Planet, and then I finished writing Birthright. And I went and recruited an agent. So I had a literary agent back in the late 90s and tried to get published. And it was a great experience because I had so many editors, you know, just slicing and dicing everything I wrote and making suggestions all over the place. And it really taught me a lot about editing, about not getting too attached to any section of work that I just written. They could all be
let
cut
go.
out. Yeah. Which that's important as a I don't want to say young writer. I wasn't that young. I was like 30, but as someone who was just getting into trying to be a professional writer, it was very important because that's something that's missing nowadays from a lot of indie writers is, I mean, a lot of them hire editors to help, you know, make sure their work is polished. But having just a whole bunch of people telling you, this is what you want to do if you want to sell your work to a publisher, and you're going to have to cut this out, you're going to have to cut that out, you're going to have to change this, and you do it because at the time, you know, that's the only way to get published. So you do it and you lose the I don't know how to put it, like, that's my babe. Well, I guess kill your darlings is the phrase that people use. You lose any sense of emotional attachment because you can always write more. You can always write another one. And I learned that early, which really helped when it came time to, you know, do it on my own as an indie writer. So I didn't get particularly attached to any idea. And if something did not move the action along in a book, then I probably shouldn't be writing it.
Right. Well, I've been writing, and one of my big concerns now that I'm working with an editor for the first time as an author working with an editor is I really want the editor to tell me when something needs to be fixed or to be taken out, because I don't want them to polish a turd, you know? Like, they could just make this scene more eloquent, to, you know, make it more concise, to fix all the grammar and the spelling. But if what the book really needs is for it to be out, like I want it out. So there's that concern there. Do you have that, or is that something that you work through as an author?
What I have learned, and the hard part was learning it while I was writing. I used to write Seat of the Pants or Discovery Writer, whatever you want to call it. It was hard learning it then because when you're doing that, you stare at the screen a lot.
Yes.
And you think a lot and you write ideas down a lot. And when you finally get something that seems good, you don't want to get rid of it. But that was the hard part, getting rid of it then. Now it's more in the outline. I can sense when something isn't going to fit. But really, it came down to, if I'm having a hard time being interested in writing this, then other people are going to have a hard time being interested in reading it. And if anything you write if you're struggling to get through it, if it's boring to you to write, if you're trying to come up with some way to make it interesting, you have to consider it might not be worth including, that you might want to try folding this into something else. It's not going to grab the reader's attention either.
So that's your spidey sense, but you're using it while you're writing. If you're writing out the scene and you're like, I'm just not into that, that's like a big red flag for you.
Yes, definitely. So, and you start thinking, like, if I'm writing a section that I think has to be there, like, well, this guy has to have a meeting with this other officer, and she has to tell him, this information. Well, maybe I could put that in another scene where something more interesting is happening instead of just having another meeting.
Yeah, that kind of answers the question I had in my head, which was, so what do you do if you're in the middle of a scene and you can tell it's boring and you can tell it needs to be changed? Like, how do you come up with an alternative?
Well, the first thing I'll try to do is think if there's anything I can combine, because I have an outline, so I can look further down the outline and say, is there anything I can combine with this? Is there something else he can be doing, and just thinking about what happened in the meeting? Is there a later period where people can talk about what happened while they're shooting at somebody or something, or running from the bad guys, something that's interesting to read about, and you just put in little bits of something that happened previously. I'll start looking, further ahead. And if further ahead doesn't work, and usually it does, but if it doesn't, then you have to start looking behind, saying, where could I include this in the last scene?
That's a really good tip, to go back to what you've already written and to put something in. It could be a paragraph or something, or a clue in. But what you've already written isn't set in stone.
I don't do it a lot anymore, because I've gotten pretty good over the last 3 years or so at outlining, at working this stuff out in the outline. Yeah. But it happened. One of the books I'm writing right now, I had to remind myself, I have to go back and put this into an earlier scene. It's not going to work here.
Yeah. Now, how do you come up with better twists? That's another question I have for plotting. The first twist you might come up with, it might seem kind of obvious or easy. How do you come up with something new and interesting?
My general process when I'm outlining, and before I get to like the detailed outline where I'm doing chapter by chapter, is I will write down plot point or a question, or like how does the main character get to this point? And I will put little, bullet points, and I will write an idea next to each one of them, and just keep writing one idea after another, and letting one feed off of the other and roll into it, And then at some point I reach an idea. And if I get one that I like, I'll put a little star next to it. And if I look back and say, no, that's not a good idea, I'll cross it out. But eventually I will get to one, I'm like, yeah, this will work. And sometimes I'll combine it with the earlier ones, and I'll just circle that. And that's the twist. That's what's going to happen. And sometimes, you get further along after you write that down, and you look back and say, oh, would it be better if this too? I mean, it's a question of trying to build on, it's like rolling a snowball down a hill. You start out with the small ideas, and then as it gets bigger and bigger, at some point you're going to hit one that you can stretch all the way back to the beginning of the book. And
do you ever
that's the great thing about outlining. So I don't have to rewrite the whole book at that point.
Do you ever get ideas from outside sources, like movies that you're watching, or politics, or a dream, or a conversation with friends? Like, do you pull stuff from life? And if so, what?
I try not to use movies too much.
Yeah.
Because it seems too obvious, And usually by the time an idea makes it to the movies, it's been through so many different books that, people are going to recognize it.
Right.
Sometimes I will use politics, but I try not to use contemporary politics, because I don't want to sound like I'm a message author. I'm not trying to write some message about contemporary politics that's going to be outdated in a year. People are going to read it and not know why I'm writing this. But I will look at, I'm a student of history. I was a history major in college. And I will look at previous previous periods of history and previous political, um, you know, events, I guess, political corruption and scandals, and you can find a lot of good ideas just in American history. Not even the 20th century. Back in the 19th century, you can find a lot of good ideas. And I know a lot of guys, especially in fantasy, a lot of people like to use medieval European history. But I honestly don't like using that in science fiction because, I mean, we're not like, I don't think we're going to be progressing constantly and nothing will ever fall back, because that will happen.
Right.
But the stuff that happened in early modern Europe, for instance, like with Napoleon and the French Revolution, that stuff to me is more relevant and interesting than medieval history when it comes to science fiction.
What makes it more relevant and interesting in science fiction?
Because it was a reaction to modernization, to progress, to changes in society.
Yeah.
And that's going to keep happening as technology changes. Old ways of living are going to be outmoded. Old jobs are going to disappear, and people will tend to get mad when that happens. And there's a lot of violence and a lot of contention, and that's French Revolution, and a bunch of different other events around the world at the same time. You know, the American Revolution. They were all contingent on changes in philosophy that were brought about by changes in technology.
So a lot of transformational societal changes happening quickly.
Right, exactly.
So you kind of look at history as like one way of understanding human nature, sort of, and then that human nature and process you can kind of put in your books, and your characters can be inspired or act in similar ways as you see other people in history happening.
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Oh. Sorry, I had to let the dog inside.
Good.
I see history as a way of, I don't know about reading human nature, but it's a way to read how people react in real situations. Because a lot of things I see in science fiction, they have people reacting to events in ways that they seem good, like cinematically or literature wise, but they don't actually ring true to me. They don't. I always think, would people actually do that?
Right.
Would people react in that way? Would, you know? It sounds good to have a hero, and obviously my work has people who do heroic things. But how do real people react? Even if you have one guy who reacts heroically, not everybody's going to react that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I find history is a good way to see, like, when you have the American Revolution, you have some people that will risk everything to fight the British for independence, and then you have other people that think it's a horrible idea and think you're a traitor for doing it.
Right.
So you can't count on, like, if you're writing one of the staples of science fiction is having like a colony rebelling against Earth or something like that. You can't count on everybody who's on the rebelling colony to say, "Oh yeah, I'm patriotic. I'm going to join your rebellion." Some people are going to say you're a traitor, and those people aren't going to be evil. They're good people. They're doing the right thing in their mind.
And then there's, during the Revolutionary War, who didn't care one way or the other. Like, they weren't on one side, they weren't on the other. They're just kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure, I haven't read up about it. Not sure I have an opinion. There's that too.
And also, when it comes to military science fiction, which I write a lot of, a lot of people who are in the military in a time of war, I mean, if you talk to them, they don't come across as like, a patriot, somebody who's there. I'm doing this for God and country. a lot of times they're cynical and skeptical and very critical of the government, of their leadership, but they fight anyway, and they do things that are often heroic, but it's not, and maybe it is at the core because they are a patriot, but that's not how they talk. That's not how they act.
Yeah, well, in boot camp, you don't really get an opinion, right?
No, but in combat, when you actually, pardon me, when you actually, or when the bullets start flying, they say there's no atheists in foxholes. Well, there's not a lot of people who are really gung-ho in foxholes either. They don't really want to be there. For the most part, they're like saying, this sucks. I don't want to be here. What stupid, general or politician put me here? So, and that's something you read in history a lot too. It's, people when they, even back in like World War One, when a lot of people were very gung-ho about the war, when they wrote home, they were like, oh yes, I'm here because I'm a patriot, I'm doing the right thing. But when they're talking to somebody in the foxhole next to them, it's like, General so-and-so is an idiot. We're going to get killed because he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right. I mean, that was part of modernism that got spawned by World War I. Is the soldiers came back and they felt such a big contrast between their experiences in the war and then what the people at home thought was happening in the war, and they weren't socially weren't really able to talk about it. There wasn't really an outlet for talking about it, and the men were supposed to be manly and silent and keep their emotions to themselves, and they didn't even understand what shell shock was back then. So
go ahead, sorry.
You're saying, like, with human nature, when you study history, you're finding that people do maybe sometimes crazier things than you would have imagined, and sometimes real life can also be a little bit more boring than you would have written in your novel.
Yeah, that's the one thing you can't be realistic about, and especially military science fiction, is the constant boredom. I mean, my son was over in the Middle East not too long ago, and he was there for a year, and they planned one combat mission after another, and just about every one of them was canceled because something went wrong, and they were just sitting around. I mean, you have to show that happens, but if you keep doing that in your novel, it's obviously not going to be interesting. So you have to kind of, compact everything, compact the time, But yeah, a lot of history is people just sitting around.
So what's an example from one of your novels where you brought in inspiration from history or inspiration from contemporaneous events to bring it into a plot decision in your novel?
My Wholesale Slaughter series that I did for Aethon, the government in that series is it's 5 separate I don't want to say kingdoms, but they're oligarchies. They're ruled by either a family or a small group of powerful people. And I based that book and the events in it on what happened after the death of Alexander the Great, when the Alexandrian Empire broke up and his generals took control of different sections of it.
That would be one historical event I know very little of. So as a reader, I probably wouldn't recognize that it's going on.
I didn't want to make it something too obvious. Like
yeah.
the breakup of Rome has been done over and over and over again in science fiction. So I wanted to do something a little bit different.
Did any of your readers pick up on it?
I have not talked to one yet that has. When I mentioned it to some of them, they're like, oh yeah. But a lot of people don't even know about that period.
Did you kind of put your own twists on it?
Well, of course. I mean, Alexander didn't have big battle mechs. But
what were some other twists that you put on it? Like, I guess everything's completely different. The technology's completely different.
Well, yeah, and also there's the idea that they were so far away from Earth and had so much time had passed that nobody really knew where it was or if it had actually existed. Because they've been through so many different apocalyptic wars and revolutions since man had left Earth that nobody had any idea where the system was that Earth was in, or if we were in the same galaxy anymore.
Mm-hmm. What about your characters in that book? Were any of them pulled from that historical time period? Just kind of
not so much. Most of the characters I try to make a little more modern so people can identify with them.
Right.
I kind of based the main character just a little. I used to be interested when I was a kid in Arthurian Britain, King Arthur's Britain. And I got really into the actual historical period where the British people, the Romano-British people, were fighting the invading Saxons, and how there was a conflict between the people who were more loyal to the fallen Rome, that wasn't there anymore, and some were more loyal to the idea of pre-Roman Britain, and the tribes that still existed north of Hadrian's Wall, and I read a lot of stories about if there had been a historical King Arthur, what he would have been like, and he would have been more of a military leader who just united the disparate kingdoms against the invading barbarians. And I kind of based the main character on an idea of him.
Arthur?
Yeah, of a real historical Arthur.
A real historical, yeah.
But,
he's more like a chieftain.
Yeah, it's like a warlord.
But in space.
Yeah.
With space marines.
With space mechs.
Okay, mechs. All right, tell me more about these mechs.
Oh, BattleTech style battle mechs. Basically, giant piloted human-looking robots.
What are your mechs like, though?
They're giant piloted human.
How many guns do they have on each side? How tall are they?
Oh, well, I have like 3 sizes of mechs. Strike mechs are the biggest, then assault mechs, and then scout mechs. I didn't want to make it too complicated. Like the BattleTech universe has like huge manuals of different mechs, but I don't have the luxury of having somebody else draw all these for me, and so I can keep them straight. So I keep it pretty simple.
All right, so wait a minute. Shout out to your fans. If there are any illustrators in your fan group, you can message Rick Partlow. You've got some drawings for him. He'd love to see them.
Definitely, yeah.
Throwing that out there.
I'd love to see them. The strike mechs are huge. They're like 50 feet tall. And they carry a lot of armor and a lot of guns, but they're really slow. And the assault mechs are kind of real versatile. They're the main ones that do most of the work. They have jump jets, so they can be dropped into places. They carry like maybe one big weapon, a few missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And the scout mechs are small and light and cheap, and you put them down when you're probably not going to run into anybody else's mechs. You just worry about armored vehicles and dismounted troops.
Do you have guys and girls piloting these mechs, or just all guys?
It's a co-ed military.
Co-ed military. And then what about your main characters? The
main character, you mean, are they women or men, or who are they?
That too.
Well, the main character through the whole book is the son of the guardian of Sparta. Sparta's like a star kingdom, if you want. And he is engaged to and later married to a woman who is a assault shuttle pilot. Assault shuttle is kind of like a starfighter, a little more versatile and larger. She's like a real hotshot pilot, Top Gun type pilot. And then there's the main character's brother, who's a scientist. And there's a woman named Lita Randell, who is the head of the Rangers, which is kind of like special operations for them. And she's a real badass. She's like his mentor, and has taught him everything he knows about infantry tactics and military history. And the only thing he didn't learn from her was how to pilot a mech. But she taught him everything else, and she's been kind of like an aunt to him, sort of, since his mother was killed during an uprising.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a very important character in the book.
And then what kind of sucks him into the plot?
Originally, he's sent on a secret mission to retrieve some lost Imperial technology. And then eventually he's forced to, when his father is assassinated, he's forced to try to take back Sparta from the rebels who took it over, usurpers or whatever you call them.
And so I won't ask you about the ending, because if anyone knows, they can find it on Audible or Amazon and get it. But
yeah, all 6 books are out on Audible now too. So.
Do your POVs kind of switch between the main character and characters on the other side of the conflict, or do they kind of stay focused on the main character?
I have multiple POVs. Most of them are from either Logan, the main character, or Katie, his fiance, later wife. But I also later, actually from about the second book on, really, I do a lot of POVs from the antagonist. I don't want to call them bad guys, because in the book, really, there's very few people in the book that could be called bad guys. They're antagonists. They're on the opposite side. But most of them think they're doing the right thing. There's only a couple that are real just tin-plated bastards, twirling their mustache. And most of those have a reason for being that way. They're just, they were kind of brutes stuck into a position over their head. But most of the people who are bad guys in the book wind up not really being bad. They're just on the other side.
Mm-hmm. But how do you sort out, as an author, how do you sort out the ending? If you know that, all the characters on the side of not all the characters, but the characters on both sides of this conflict are, fighting for home and fighting for family and fighting for duty and what's right. And so how do you pick a side?
Well, like I said, there are a couple characters who are just selfish and self-centered and doing this for their own glory.
Yeah.
And they get theirs,
Mm-hmm.
But for the ones who are in it for the right reasons, I think that something that's not used enough, and especially in military science fiction, is the fact that in the end of a war, usually nobody loses completely. There's very few wars where people lose completely. So I try to work that in, that you have concessions that are made, and things don't end exactly like you want them to, but they're enough that people can get by with and live.
I like that. I thought you were going to finish that sentence and say no one wins in a war, but I kind of like that in reality, a lot of times no one completely loses, that both sides get a win.
Yeah, I mean, there's exceptions, of course. I mean, World War I and II, but look at Korea. Nobody lost and nobody won. Vietnam, nobody really lost the war. We pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
The South Vietnamese lost, but the North Vietnamese didn't get everything they wanted. We decided it wasn't worth our time. And in the wholesale slaughter books, there's an element of that where one side eventually decides it's not worth, breaking ourselves on this when we can get pretty much what we want through negotiation and treaty.
And then both sides can win to some degree.
To some degree. And I know that's one thing I liked about how I ended Wholesale Slaughter, is that when I started to write it, I had an idea of how it would end.
Mm-hmm.
The stereotypical way that this kind of story would end. And when I got closer to the end, I just thought, that's not what he would want. That's not what he's looking for. It's it would look good as far as the story goes, but if you read the BattleTech novels, and you probably didn't, but a lot of people who read my books have read those. The main character in those is miserable most of the time, and everybody who gets any position of power in those books winds up dying, or having their loved ones die, or having their children die, or having their parents. It's just like, why? And I started thinking, why would anybody want to be in a position of power in this universe? It's like Game of Thrones.
Right.
It was the same thing. I mean, I'm sure it was the writers who did the BattleTech novels were probably basing it on medieval European history.
Yeah.
And the perks to being a king or queen were there, but also there was just a lifetime worth of intrigue and people dying. And somebody actually says in the book, the main character and his fiance, they're talking about, oh, we can't really have a life or a family right now until this is over, until we win the war, and take back Sparta, and then we can get married, and you can be the queen. And she says, like, because that worked out so well for your parents, because they're both dead. The mother died in a rebellion, the father died in another rebellion. So in the end, he had to look at that and say, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to be the head of this government?
Right. Well, how many fairy tales have been written where someone gets a wish, right, and then they take that wish, and then the ending is completely the opposite of what they thought it would be if they got what they asked for.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty much a trope, is that wishes are always usually bad. I kind of think that people didn't think about the wish long enough, though. When I read those stories, I would have sat down and written down exactly what I wanted to the detail.
A little more thought and planning.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, speaking of thought and planning, so you've been posting on Facebook about your word counts. And that is really exciting and encouraging to me, because my word counts are very low. But that someone could write so much. Like, maybe you're just going to say it's a whole lot of hard work and keep working at it. But how do you write 1 million words in a year, or almost 1 million words? You're getting close to 1 million words in a year. What's your process? What's your secret?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't just say it's hard work. It's habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything else. You see people run marathons. I've run a couple of marathons.
Wow.
And I can't do that anymore. I managed to hurt myself at some point. But while I was doing it, I wasn't any more strong or durable or anything than anybody else, but made a habit of getting up, like 4:30 in the morning and going running. And it just became second nature. It's what you do.
Right.
And if you do anything long enough, it becomes a habit, and it doesn't seem extreme. It doesn't seem like you're being put out. It seems like you're just doing what you do every day. And at some point, it just becomes normal.
So you make a daily habit, like a set time. What's your set time?
Well, I write a lot during the day. Basically, my habit has become, if I'm not out driving somewhere or working out, if I'm at home, then I have my laptop open and I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe I'll be writing really intensely, a lot, and maybe there'll be like a football game on, and I write, just a few hundred words in an hour. But I have it open. I'm thinking about the story.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not doing anything else important, basically, then that's what I'm doing. It's a sacrifice in a way, because just like everybody else, I like to sit back and do nothing. I like to, cruise the internet, or look through TV shows, or look what's on Netflix. But if you make a habit of using your downtime to do something, that you love doing, then that's what you do all the time. It's I have the laptop with me when I'm, sitting in the doctor's office waiting room, or or sitting in my car waiting to pick up, my daughter from something. It's just becomes a habit. As far as the actual word counts, there are people who write a lot more words in a day than I do, but most of them don't write every day. I talk to people. I wrote 10,000 words. I wrote 17,000 words in a day once. Well, yeah, once, but it still took you 4 months to write the book because you wrote 17,000 words and then you wrote like 500 words a day for the rest of the month. I write 2,000 words a day in any single book so far, and the book is done in a month and a half. And I can do 2,000 words in one book. It's about the limit I've found where I can keep my concentration. I mean, at this point I write 5,000 words a day, but I write 2 different books, 2,000 words each, and another 1,000 words. And if I'm honest, I think the ideal, if I didn't have contracts I'd sign and need to get this stuff done, would be writing like 1,000 words in 3 different things, maybe 4 different things every day.
How do you do that? See, that's the other thing I read, that you flip between projects and that keeps you going.
But I get bored writing when I write more than 2,000 words in one book, I tend to get to the point where I'm not as interested. And that's like a false positive, because I'll start thinking, is there something wrong with this scene? Why am I not interested? But it's really because I've been working on this for hours and I just don't want to do it anymore that day. So that means it's not that I couldn't write more words on it, but I wouldn't know if they were good or not. So a lot of people write very rough first drafts also, and that's how they write a lot more words in a day. I tend to write very clean first drafts, and basically all I need, usually, unless some plot point crops up in the end, I have to change things. Usually all I need to do is have it proofread, and for consistency and names and things like that. So when you're writing a clean first draft like that, it takes longer and you can't write quite as many words at one time, which is why 2,000 words can take 4 or 5 hours for me. But after I've spent 4 or 5 hours on one thing, I just don't want to do it for the rest of the day.
Right.
But I can write other things. I can let that go, put it away, pick up something else, and this sounds more interesting right now. I can concentrate on this and not get bored for at least 1,000 words or so.
So you like to have fun with one manuscript in the morning and then maybe have fun with another one in the afternoon, something like that? Usually
I will write 2,000 words before mid-afternoon, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, depending on what time I get up. Because when I'm working, I'll get up earlier and I'll start writing earlier. If I'm working the day job. If I'm not, I will just start, whenever I wake up, like 9 or 10 o'clock, I'll be into it. But usually I'll be done by 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the 2,000 words. And then I'll go work out or something. And about 5 o'clock, I'll start writing the 1,000 word chunk. And I'm done with that by about 7:30. And then around 8, I'll write the last 2,000 words, which can take anywhere between 11 o'clock all the way to 1 in the morning.
And is that all in the same project, or do you
That's 3 different projects.
3 different projects.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And Dean Floyd says, great perspective on daily word count. So with the 3 different projects, your series are all in one universe. Am I understanding that right?
No. I think if I was working on 3 series in the same universe, I might get bored with that too. Currently I'm working on 3 different series in 3 different universes.
Oh, how do you do that? I'm just totally blown away. First, you have to keep 3 different plots in mind and sets of characters in mind, but also 3 different settings and universes in mind in one day. That's crazy. How do you do that?
Well, the setting is the hardest part because I forget what the names of the planets and the systems and things like that are. It's not that hard to keep the characters. I mean, you just read like the last page you wrote, and drop back into what you're doing. But yeah, the settings, I constantly, what's the name of this planet? What planet were they on a second ago? I don't remember. So that part is hard. Uh, all three of the projects I'm working on right now are all from first person points of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that easier to keep track of because when it's third person, I'm kind of like, for me, third person is stepping back from the character, from you're not out seeing from behind their eyes. You're kind of watching them like on a TV screen.
You are, yeah, it's true.
And it's harder for me to individualize those characters if I'm working on more than one thing at a time. But if I'm inside somebody's head, then it's easier for me to step back there and look through their eyes.
So are the heads that you choose kind of similar in personality, or do you pick wildly different ones in order to kind of get into different
very different.
Okay. Where do you
like
come up
right now I've got one character who is just a total smartass, doesn't take anything seriously. He's also got like all kinds of personal problems. Like he's divorced and he and his ex-wife hate each other and he hasn't seen his kid in a year. And he's got PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an alcoholic. He's an alcoholic he's not currently drinking. It's been like 3 years since he drank anything, but that's something else he has to worry about. So he's just got like all these things rolling around. And then there's another guy who's a straight arrow former police officer who was wrongfully accused of being corrupt, and he's like a real Boy Scout, sees everything black and white. And it's easy to write him because everybody around him is really the foils, the people that are honest. And then there's one other where the guy is just like somebody who's had tragedy their whole life, where they have nothing and they're trying to build relationships and build a place in the world and trying to learn to trust people. So it's like three totally different characters. So it's easier to keep them apart.
Does that help to get into the voice, the fact they're so distinct from each other?
It's easier for me to. I just have to think about where they're coming from, because if the three similar characters, they would all start sounding like each other.
They blend, yeah. So do you make these characters up from whole cloth, or do you have people who are like that and you're kind of like using them as a reference? Or
I used to use people I know. Like the first couple of books I wrote, there's a lot of people that I know in those books, a lot of me in those books. They always say that your first book is autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
So like Duty, Honor, Planet, I could name you people that represent almost every one of the characters in that book. I mean, they wouldn't, not that they're superheroes or commandos or anything, but when I had them respond to something, I would think, how would so-and-so respond? What would they say? But nowadays, no, it's more like I watch the news, or watch like documentaries and see real people, in real situations, and I try to base the characters on traits I see in them.
That's cool. So you kind of used people you knew as a crutch, sort of? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, everybody does that. Everybody, especially starting out.
Yeah, starting out. But you've been able to kind of develop your craft so that your imagination can imagine what it's like to be that person you see somewhere, see from history or see in the news or whatever, and imagine their mind and imagine their feelings.
Yeah, like especially documentaries. If you watch documentaries about, like I've watched a lot of documentaries about World War II.
Mm-hmm.
I used to watch a lot more than I do now because I don't have as much time. But I watched a lot of documentaries about the war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, about the Gulf War, just recent things like that. And there's a lot of interviews with soldiers, Marines, politicians, and you can take character traits you see in those people and use them in your own characters.
That's really cool. Well, our 15-minute interview has turned into a 50-minute interview, which is awesome because I had a great time learning about where you get your ideas from, and also how you're able to write so much. I think I'll try to put some of this to use too, which is mostly build a habit every day. But thank you for coming on the show and sharing all
Thank
this.
you for having me.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for everyone also for joining us today. Can you remind our viewers and listeners where you can find you and your books?
My author website is www.rickpartlow.com. My Facebook page is facebook.com/dutyhonorplanet.com. And you can find my books on Amazon. Just search for my name. I use my real name as my author name, so I'm the only one there as far as I know.
And Audible too now, right?
Yes, Audible. I got a lot of books on Audible.
Yes, with an excellent narrator, I've heard. All right, so to everyone in the live chat and our YouTube viewers and podcast listeners, thanks for hanging out with us today. Let us know what you thought about the show in the comments, and show your support with a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe and bell button so you know when we've got more shows going on. This has been another Keystroke Medium chat. We'll see you next time, actually tonight, for some more reading, writing, and everything in between here on Keystroke Medium.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.